اريان 5. بعد حوالي تقريبا 27 دقيقة يبدأ الانطلاق. صوت واضح؟
Welcome to the Guyana Space Center and the launch of Heinrich Hertz satellite and Syracuse
صوت
4B
واضح؟
on the last ever Arian5 rocket.
Our passengers are here on the pad, inside the top of the rocket, ready to begin their ride into space. The teams in launch control, about 1 kilometer from the pad, are performing the last crucial operations before launch.
مساء الخير للجميع واهلا وسهلا فيكم. اليوم راح نبدأ متابعة اريان 5. فتحنا تشات للجميع. طبعا اريان 5 هو صاروخ يتبع اريان سبيس، يعني هو فرنسي لكنه سب كونتراكت مع وكالة الفضاء الاوربية إيسا. انطلاقه أول انطلاق كان 1996، وهذا الانطلاق حقيقة فشل منذ البداية. يعني انطلق هذا الصاروخ وانحرف عن مداره بسبب أخطاء في التوجيه والسوفت ويرز، وفشلت المهمة، وأصيبت حقيقة وكالة الفضاء الأوروبية بفشل يعني وخيبة أمل نتيجة فشل هذه المهمة. لكن بعد ذلك حقق نجاحات كبيرة جدا، يعني استمر في الخدمة حوالي 27 سنة، وأطلق حوالي 116 مهمة فضائية، واليوم بيكون 117، ونجحت منها 111. نحن نتكلم عن 111 مهمة فضائية ناجحة، وهذه المهام بعضها مهام علمية، مهام تجارية، مهام عسكرية، مهام أمنية، أقمار صناعية، يعني متنوع الأغراض. يعني نسبة النجاح لكل إطلاقات أريان 5 حوالي 96%. طبعا أريان 5 حمل مركب أقمار صناعية عديدة ومركبات فضائية، يعني صعب نعدها كلها الآن، لكن نحكي أهم المركبات المهمة جدا اللي هو رفعها. أول شيء هو حمل مهمة فضائية إلى الفضاء إلى كوكب عطارد، هاي مهمة كانت كثير مهمة. ثم من ضمن المهام الفضائية مهمة فضائية هورشل، تلسكوب فضاء هورشل، وكذلك بلانك ساتلايت اللي هو قام بتصوير المايكروويف باك جراوند راديشن، وكذلك اللي هي الخلفية الماكروية اللي أعطانا صورة دقيقة جدا عن تاريخ الكون السحيق جدا. وكذلك مهمة روزيتا اللي هي أول مهمة رفع ساتلايت اوربيتر بدور حول مذنب، فكانت هاي أول مهمة فضائية لساتلايت أو مركب فضائي بروب بدور حول مذنب. وكذلك جوسي، وعملنا عليها حقيقة برنامج كامل اللي هي المهمة الفضائية لأقمار المشتري، الأقمار الجليدية في المشتري. ثم أهم شيء بيذكر لنا بنسمعه اللي هو في 2021 حمل التلسكوب الفضائي جيمس ويب إلى الفضاء، وبالتالي هذا طبعا أغلى تلسكوب وأيقونة التلسكوبات الفضائية. هذا كلف حوالي 10 مليار دولار، واستغرق في إنشائه حوالي 20 سنة من بين التخطيط والتنفيذ والتصميم. فهو من حمل تلسكوب فضاء ووضعه في المدار، والآن تلسكوب الفضاء جيمس ويب موجود في الفضاء في منطقة تسمى L2 لاجرانج 2. طبعا تلسكوب أريان 5 عفوا صاروخ أريان 5 هو صاروخ مهم جدا، ويعني قدم خدمة كبيرة جدا. فاليوم بنقول له وداعا اريان 5، لأنه آخر مهمة فضائية له. في أسباب عديدة حقيقة تعود وراء هذا القرار. السبب ممكن نجزيها: السبب الأول مالي، والسبب الثاني تقني. السبب الأول مالي، يعني المهام الفضائية في أريان 5 بتكلف ما بين 165 إلى 220 مليون دولار، وهذا رقم كبير جدا بالمقارنة مع فالكون 9. فالكون 9 يعني كان بيكلف حوالي 70 مليون دولار. فقارن الآن ما بين 70 مليون دولار و160، يعني بتحكي عن الضعف أو أكثر. فهذا كان إشكالية أولى. الإشكالية الثانية أنه عدد الرحلات في السنة، يعني أريان 5 بيقدم حوالي من 5 إلى 6 مهام فضائية بالسنة، ولهذا السبب وكالة الفضاء الأوربية بتفكر الآن تعمل أريان 6، لكنها في عثرات كبيرة في هذا الموضوع. أريان 6 راح يكون أرخص، المهام الفضائية حوالي 60-70 مليون، وكذلك عدد إطلاقات قد تصل إلى 12 إطلاق في السنة. طبعا بانتهاء هذه المهمة هم طبعا حاولوا يعني يطولوا في عمره، لكن المينتنانس والصيانة أصبحت مكلفة، والأبديتد والتصميم تاعه والسوفت ويرز كله حقيقة أصبح يعني تقريبا صاروخ قديم بالمقارنة مع الصواريخ الحديثة، وخاصة الصواريخ الأمريكية فالكون والصواريخ الروسية سويز. طبعا بعد هذا الانطلاق سوف تصبح أوروبا أو وكالة الفضاء الأوروبية بلا ناقل إلى الفضاء. لن تكون وكالة الفضاء الأوروبية لها أكسس على الفضاء بشكل مستقل، لابد أن تعتمد. عندها حقيقة عدة خيارات. في الخيار الأول فيجا سي اللي هو الصاروخ الإيطالي، لكنه فشل مرتين وهي عليه كويستشن مارك. عندها خيار فالكون 9، تصير تستأجر من فالكون 9 زيها زي أي دولة أخرى، وهذا حقيقة لا يليق بالأوروبيين كلهم بضمن وكالاتهم العديدة أنهم يصبحوا يستأجروا يعني صواريخ من سبيس إكس فالكون 9، أو إعادة التعامل مع الصواريخ الروسية سويز. الإشكالية أنه بعد حرب أوكرانيا توقفت العلاقات في الفضائية بين فرنسا، بين أوروبا وروسيا، وبالتالي حتى هذه الصواريخ روس أوقفوا خدمتهم. لكن سمعت تقرير بيقول أنه في هناك اتصالات ما بين الفرنسيين والروس، بحيث أنه في هناك بتعرف ويب 1 اللي هو منظومة الأقمار الصناعية اللي حتنشر أقمار صناعية من الفضاء. حوالي 36 قمر صناعي الآن موجودات في المخازن، فقد تكون مقايضة أنه يقوم الاتصال بالروس وترفع على صواريخ روسية سويز. إذا الآن وكالة الفضاء الأوروبية أمام أزمة ناقل للفضاء حقيقية، وهذا الأمر يعني هم بيعولوا على فالكون 6، لكن في حديث يعني كثير الاستراتيجيين وحتى مدير عام وكالة الفضاء الأوروبية أشار إلى أنه فالكون 6 قد يأخذ وقت، ممكن ما ينتهيش في 2023 2024. إذن خلال هذه الفترة سوف تكون هناك أزمة نواقل، أزمة صواريخ في أوروبا. وحتى فالكون اريان 6 مش ريوزد، مش قابل استخدام. التقديرات بتشير أنه حتى تستطيع أوروبا أن تصل إلى عمل صواريخ قادرة أنها تستخدم ريوز تحتاج إلى تكنولوجيا، وهي تقدر وقت قد تصل إلى 2030. فهي الآن حقيقة في مأزق.
Over the next hour, we'll be bringing you live coverage from here, the Jupiter Mission Control Center.
And we will take you on a VIP tour of the new Arian6 launch pad. I'm Raphael Chevrier.
I'm Katie Haswell, and welcome to Flight VA261.
And the start of our satellite's journey on the road to space.
Operations running smoothly here at launch pad number 3, where today we are turning a page in space history. The last of the Arian5 rockets is waiting to make her final journey into space before passing the baton to Arian6. And our
people tonight and all the team are moved because it is, as you have said, the last Arian5, and focused because what we need now is to make the final preparations for the final Arian5 launch. So moved and focused.
Yeah, absolutely. So Stefan, thank you so much for that. So you can head back now to take up your position in the fishbowl, and good luck for the operations. Thank you, Stefan. So after 27 years, the mighty Arian
for jamming. This will enable French armed forces to stay connected and communicate even when in combat zones. First and foremost, Syracuse 4B highlights French expertise.
Syracuse 4 est un très bel exemple de coopération industrielle nationale. Aux côtés d'Airbus Defence and Space, Thales Alenia Space, mandataire auprès de la DGA pour le système Syracuse 4, a reproduit pour Syracuse 4B la charge utile qui fonctionne sans faille à bord de Syracuse 4A lancé en 2021. Les développements portés par le programme Syracuse positionnent la France à la pointe des nations spatiales dans le domaine des télécommunications militaires.
This latest addition to the Syracuse 4 program will play a crucial role in national defense by enabling the French armed forces to coordinate their operations and share
And teams have been working here at the spaceport now for the last couple of months, preparing these 2 satellites for their journey today, and of course the Arian5 launcher. We call this preparation process the launch campaign.
Yes, but let me remind you that the launcher and satellites team have been working together for years to prepare these missions. But you're right, the launch campaign has started early May of this year, and so the customers have performed. So the satellites got transferred to the final assembly building where they met the launcher Arian5 for the very first time, and they got integrated on top of the launcher in this building.
And then, of course, the next thing was the transfer of the whole thing to its pad. That took place 2 days ago, and we actually filmed it, didn't we? We did a live show because it's a very special event, the last ever transfer.
It's a very special operation that is very specific to Arian5, so it's a very slowly process. The whole launcher and the table, it weighs 2,000 tons. It's towed by a small truck, and it's traveling 3 kilometers or so in 40 minutes. So very careful process on the vertical position. And so right now, Arian5 is standing on the launch pad, ready for the launch.
And on launch pad number 3, we have a number of different launch pads here, though, because the Guyana Space Centre is a big place. We have lots of different facilities. It covers about 700 square kilometres. I think it's about 3 times bigger than the capital city, Cayenne. And the whole thing is known as the range. The job of administering it and managing it falls to the French Space Agency, over to their president.
Good evening. Today will go down as a day to remember in France and Europe's space program. In a few minutes, Arian5 will be lifting off for the last time from CSG, the European Space Center. I would like to dwell on this special and heart-stirring moment to recall some of the fantastic feats of this venerable launcher, the flagship of Europe's space industry. Between 1996 and today's final flight, Ariane5 has clocked up 170 launches. With its unique lift capacity and orbital injection precision, it has carried a host of payloads into space, serving telecommunications, Earth observation, and space exploration missions. Let me reflect on some of these emblematic missions. Let me start with Rosetta, which embarked a one-way trip to Comet Chury atop Ariane5 on March 2004, going into orbit around its target. 10 years later, an odyssey followed all over the world. Galileo, the best worldwide known
European positioning service. More recently, the Webb telescope launched on December 21
that is sending back stunning pictures of our universe. Today, we are poised to launch Syracuse 4B towards a destination which is much closer to home, but nevertheless equally vital for our security. CNES's role in developing this satellite, both on technology development and project coordination, has been instrumental as the space architect of Syracuse 4 program, providing its expertise to the Defense Procurement Agency, DGA, and to the armed forces. This evening, Arian5 is therefore bowing out with a mission crucial to sustaining our military capabilities. I wish you a great launch, another fine chapter to add to the history of Europe and France's space program. We can be proud of what we have done, and we can be proud of this illustrious lady. Go Arian5, go!
اقتربنا 11 دقيقة للإطلاق.
Coming up to 11 minutes to launch. The final countdown actually started 11 hours ago, and there's a whole succession of operations that happens during that time. Coming up now to an important moment, which is the final weather check. Of course, all eyes on the weather here in the European spaceport. Yesterday we did have a delayed launch. We can control most things, but of course the weather's down to Mother Nature, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. But what we typically check is the wind at high altitude, the wind around the launch pad, and the risk of lightning that could damage the electronics during the launch. Rain is not so much of a problem, and that's a good thing because it's been raining quite a lot in the past days. We are in the tropical weather here in French Guiana, and we are actually in between the rainy and the dry season.
Yes, it's not called the Amazon rainforest for nothing, but it's actually a very good place for launching rockets from, isn't it?
Oh yes, it's an ideal location for launching satellites into space. In French Guiana, there is no big tropical storm, no hurricane, no earthquake, and more importantly, we are located 5 degrees north of the equator, which gives us a maximum slingshot effect given by the rotation of the Earth. French Guiana has also an amazing wildlife, and sometimes we see some animals wandering around the preparation buildings, but let's say that in more than 40 years of activity, nature and technology have learned to live in harmony here in French Guiana.
Oh, that's very, very true. We see some beautiful animals here. I actually saw recently a sloth crawling very slowly across the main road. My heart was slightly in my mouth for it, but it was absolutely fine. So we have 2 control rooms. This is the Mission Control Center, primarily concerned with the entire mission, and of course the Range Operations Manager here in the Mission Control Center calls out all the major events to the base. But we have another control center, it's launch control, and that's much closer to the pad in what we call the bunker. What are they doing over there, Raphael?
So they are in charge of all the operations to do with the launcher and the pad. So they woke up quite early this morning in order to start the final countdown. This was at about 7 a.m. And so they are leading and monitoring the operations leading us to the launch. For example, you have the filling of the tanks with liquid oxygen and hydrogen. You have the cooling of the Vulcan engine and the sphere pressurization of the main and the upper stage. That's just to name a few, of course.
ومرحب بالجميع.
Right now they're all really focusing very hard because we're getting closer to launch.
نبدأ فيهم
8 minutes and 11
ودكتور
seconds
عادل
and counting.
ياسين ومحمد
And of course, here in the Mission Control Center, all eyes at this stage before
وروان
launch on the status
وتهاني
panels, those
وبسر
were the green
دياب
boards that we
وزيد
saw
هاشم.
earlier. And
كان
they're giving us
البوشي
all kinds of
معانا
information,
رزاق
very
قبل
important
شوي بس ما
information.
بعد
Obviously,
مرة
green is go and red is
نشكره
stop.
من
But what are they
المقام
actually telling
يعني
us,
قام
Rafael?
بعمل دعاية
So
سريعة.
we are monitoring several main parameters. For example, the weather, which is green right now, the launch base, the rocket, and of course the 2 satellites inside the fairing right now. All these systems, they send their status to this panel, and they all need to remain green in order for the launch to go ahead. And like Stefan said a little bit earlier, we have a quite comfortable launch window tonight, more than 1 hour. So if for any reason the clock happened to stop, we have some time in order to understand what's happening, to solve the issue, and to start the clock again.
Coming up to the beginning of the synchronized sequence.
À tous de DDO, attention pour la séquence finale, lanceur. Top I0 -7 minutes.
And the synchronized sequence has begun. Raymond Boyce, the Range Operations Manager, or DDO in French, has announced it. And Arian5 standing tall for a sunset liftoff. What's happening in the synchronized sequence?
So there is a complex set of operations leading us to the launch and giving more and more autonomy to the rocket. So just to name a few, we have the topping up and the pressurization of the tanks of the main stage and of the upper stage. At the onboard computer, we'll receive the exact time for liftoff. It's located right here, and that's the brain of the rocket, if you want. At 1 minute to launch, the power supply will switch from the ground to the rocket. The launch, we will see it only when the 2 lateral boosters ignite. Believe me, this is going to be spectacular.
Well, it will be, because Arian5 is always very, very spectacular. Some of the most important missions started their life on board her. She's had a fantastic career. Let's have a little look at some of her highlights.
عواطف الأوروبيين بهذا الحدث، رغم يعني ساعدين بإطلاق المهمة الفضائية، لكنهم بيعرفوا أن هاي آخر مهمة فضائية حتى يعني يتم إنجاز صاروخ آخر، وهذا قد يأخذ وقت. فالآن يعني في أزمة للفضاء في أوروبا، وسوف تحمل إما الصواريخ الأمريكية فالكون 9 بحاجة إلى نواقل الفضاء، وسوف تصبح أوروبا يعني حقيقة تنتقل الفضاء بشكل غير مستقل من خلال نواقل خارجية. كان عوض على صاروخ فيجا سي اللي صار فيه فشل مرتين فيجا سي، واريان 6 يعني لسه ما متعثر ويحتاج إلى وقت حتى ما عندنا غير خيارين. لو حكينا قبل قليل في اتصالات حقيقة فرنسية روسية لاستخدام الصواريخ الروسية لنقل، لأنه في وان ويب، هاي صواريخ الوان ويب 36 ساتلايت الوان ويب 36 قمر صناعي الآن موجودين في المخازن ما في، وكان سحب إلى أوروبا الصواريخ بسبب إشكالية أوكرانيا. فبالتالي الآن قد يتم استخدام الصواريخ الروسية النقل الصناعي الموجود في المخازن. 36 قمر صناعي الآن في المخازن تلاقين حاليا. عنده أزمة بالفضاء في أوروبا، لابد يعني النظر الآن في قضية منظومات صاروخية. أوروبا أو صواريخ استخدام زي فالكون 9 يحتاج إلى تكنولوجيا جديدة جدا وتفكير، لأنه قد تحتاج إلى 2030 حتى تستطيع أوروبا أن تصنع صواريخ قابلة للاستخدام. من غرب الصواريخ في العالم هو أمريكا بالفالكون 9، وكان اريان في اطلاق المهمة الفضائية اللي حكينا من 165 مليون الى 220 مليون دولار. هنا فالكون 9 70 مليون دولار، كثير جدا. هذا من تاثير على اطلاق الصواريخ في اوروبا زائد اضافي لعدد حبيبي بحاجه شغل الان. اعتقد بقي دقيقتين.
The legend indeed, and what a beauty.
Gives me goosebumps.
It does, goosebumps. It's very moving, but every exit is an entrance, and we're looking forward to the new Arian5, so we have exciting times ahead. And Raphael and I have come up to our skybox now. We're going to commentate from here now for the rest of the program. 2 minutes and 16 seconds to launch, and I guess it would be a good time now to run through some of the things people should be looking out for.
Yeah, so only 6 seconds before liftoff we will see the cryogenic arms retract. That's very last minute because the propellant it provides to the upper stage is extremely cold and constantly evaporating in this warm tropical climate. The Vulcan engine will ignite first. We will need to check it's working properly before we switch on the boosters. This will happen 7 seconds later, so we won't see the launcher moving during these 7 seconds. This is just a little warm-up before the very last Arian5 rocket takes off to the sky. Can you imagine, Katie, that next time the satellites will see the outer world, it will be in the emptiness of space?
That's quite a thought, isn't it? 1 minute and 17 seconds now.
À tous de DDO, attention pour moins 1 minute.
دقيقة.
Enjoy the show.
هيك وكأن على
Top H0 moins 1 minute.
لحظات تحبس الأنفاس. بدنا حد يصور لحظة إطلاق. هاي صورة تاريخية حقيقة. بلش يعد الآن هسه.
À tous de DDO, attention pour le décompte final.
كأنه الآن بلش اشتعال.
10, 9, 8,
بلش
7, 6, 5,
بلش
4, 3, 2, unité, top, allumage moteur Vulcain. Allumage 2EAP, décollage.
تم الانطلاق بنجاح.
Propulsion nominale.
هذه آخر رحلة حدث.
Tous les paramètres à bord sont normaux.
واو.
Propulsion nominale.
لا بلاش الانطلاقة الأولى يا بسمة. الانطلاقة الأولى كان في 96 وفشلت.
Syracuse 4B and Heinrich Hertz satellite blazing a trail on board the last ever Arian5 across the equatorial skies, and we can hear the rumble of her engines as she flies over.
It's very impressive, and we are 11 kilometers from the pad, and the delay of the vibration is a bit amazing. we cannot get tired of it, and we have a very good view of the launcher right now.
Trajectoire nominale.
He's telling us that the trajectory is nominal. Everything is going according to plan. 1 minute and 56 seconds into the launch. Fantastic view of Arian5.
Well, we have a very good view. I'm sure we will see the booster separation with the camera.
Nominal.
So the propulsion is working perfectly, nominally, as we say in the space jargon. And here we will see the booster separation. Yeah, we see it.
Séparation de 2 EAP.
Wow.
And we have confirmation from the range operations manager.
Look at this. That's absolutely amazing.
Those two boosters on the right and the left being jettisoned. The white dot in the middle, the Vulcan engine.
So they are providing 90% of the overall thrust. And so they have been jettisoned. They are 240 tons each. The launcher on the ground was 771 tons.
And we don't need them anymore. We're shedding weight.
So everybody is completely nominal. So next step is the separation of the fairing.
That's coming up in about 10 seconds. You can see on the top of the screen our trajectory on the left-hand side is the planned route for the vehicle. And separation there of the fairing is what it looks like.
Séparation de la coiffe.
We have confirmation there of separation of the fairing. So we don't need it anymore, Raphael.
Nominale.
Exactly. So we were 117 kilometers above the ground when we separated the fairing, so we crossed the limits of the atmosphere. We are now in space, where the remaining gas is so thin that the friction it generates on the satellite is very negligible. Just to mention also that we switch from real camera to 3D images now, because that's how we can follow the steps of the mission. The fairing was also used to protect the satellites from the noise generated at launch. We obviously need to jettison it correctly to follow the logic of shedding as much weight as fast as possible, because the lighter the craft, the faster it goes, in order to release H2SAT and Syracuse 4B in less than half an hour from now.
And that's the name of the game, of course, to lose mass so that we can climb higher into space. And the captain has switched off the seatbelt signs. If you look at our altitude at the top of the screen, 168 kilometers and climbing. So we have crossed what some people think of as the border with space, the Kármán line, which was at
437 kilometers,
يعني planet. And yes, we can see
low Earth orbit.
Heinrich Hertz satellite for the first time.
يعني بارتفاع محطة الفضاء الدولية
they were going to see space the next time they saw the outside world. Well, now Heinrich Hertz can see space.
That's the case for the upper passengers. The lower passenger, Syracuse 4B, needs to wait a little longer in order to meet space for the first time. What we see is the black structure. This is the dual launch structure.
الأقمار الصناعية على
two satellites under a single fairing.
1000 kilometers راح تكون الأوربت إلها عالي جدا.
It's a very clever piece of kit because it allows you to attach one satellite at the front, and then it protects the satellite in the lower berth. He's just told us that we have about 3 minutes roughly left on the
main stage.
On the main stage burn.
So thanks to the Vulcan engine, that's the engine of the main stage, we are gaining lots of speed right now. So in less than 2.5 minutes, we will go from 4 to 7 kilometers per second, which is very fast, obviously. And this is a huge structure.
الجميع طبعا
30 meters
اللفت الطيب اليوم عمل
filled with
دعاية.
approximately 160 tons of cryogenic propellant stored in two different compartments.
عم يرتفع نحو
One for
الأعلى
liquid oxygen, one for
حوالي
liquid hydrogen.
بسرعة الآن زاد السرعة
You
صارت
definitely don't want to touch
4
it because
كيلومتر
it's
في
extremely
الثانية
cold. It's 100
وابتعد
degrees
مسافة حوالي
below zero.
800 كيلومتر عن
And
الأرض.
it's incredible when you think that the two boosters on the side are burning at phenomenally hot temperatures. So you've got the very cold tank in the middle with the very hot boosters on the side when they are burning. And of course, that's just such a remarkable feat of human engineering, isn't it?
Two extremes side by side. So everything is going perfectly right now.
We're flying out across the equator. Our flight path takes us across the Atlantic, across Africa. We'll be heading out towards the Indian Ocean. And he's telling us that we have now picked up the signal at the ground station in Natal, which is on the northeastern coast of Brazil, and we're tracking the launcher using telemetry.
Yeah, so the launcher sends signals back to Earth all along the flight, which are recorded by a network of telemetry stations so that the teams can make sure that the mission is performing nominally. Again, that's a word that we will hear very often during this flight. It's like a relay race with one telemetry station passing the baton to the next one. By the way, the trajectory today is a little bit different than usual. We will release the telecommunication satellites on an orbit with an inclination of 3 degrees with respect to the equator, instead of 6 degrees as it's usually the case for this kind of missions. So it will be easier for the satellites to reach their final geostationary orbit. We were able to do so because we had some remaining performance on Arian5, and when we have some margin, we just give it to the customers. And so the first station to pick up the signal was Galileo here in Kourou. Now it's Natal, and then we will have other stations all along the flight path.
Coming up on the next sequence of events.
هاي المنحنى على اليسار منحنى السرعة مع الارتفاع. تقريبا عم تثبت إلى حد ما الآن حوالي 7000 أو 6700.
So he's just announced and confirmed a sequence of 3 very important and very delicate events.
Yes, so the extension of the main stage engine, the successful separation of the main stage from the rest of the launcher, and just now the ignition of the upper stage. It's super important step because, you know, there are 3 engines on the rocket, 4 engines, sorry, 3 are ignited on the ground, and this is the only one which is ignited in space at 200 and almost 40 kilometers of altitude. So it's a very delicate operation, and it's imperative that we succeed in order to continue the mission.
So we were being tracked still by the Galileo tracking station in the CSG. We've really begun the upper stage phase now of the flight, very much the next phase of the journey. The upper stage has taken the wheel. Its engine burns about 16 minutes, and it's a really clever piece of kit. It's got a number of jobs. It's got one particularly very important job, of course.
Well, it's to transport the satellites to their transfer orbit where they're going to be released. We need to do this, obviously, in a very precise trajectory, in a very precise way. Good news is everything is going smoothly right now.
ما في مشاكل لحد الآن الأمور ماشية صح.
Let's have a look now at Space Team Europe.
الفريق الأوروبي للفضاء.
Donc je suis chef de mission et je coordonne donc toutes les opérations entre les clients satellites, la base et les opérations de préparation du lanceur. Donc ceci dès l'arrivée des satellites en Guyane jusqu'à leur livraison dans l'espace.
Donc moi je suis technicien fluide au sein de CGX Space. Mon but c'est de participer aux activités fluides, de la mise en œuvre, la propreté en gaz, en liquide et en finalité de faire le remplissage du lanceur Arian5. Et pour imager un peu On est un peu des pompistes.
طلعوا يا جماعة الخير شباب وصبايا صغار السن.
campagne mécanique générale en
علوم
charge de la
الفضاء
table de lancement
تشجع
Arian5
كل
qui est la table sur laquelle
طلابنا في
est posé le lanceur pour
والمدارس.
son transfert et
شوفي
le
هذا
décollage.
أعمارهم
Dans un premier temps, nous mettons en
بالعشرينات
configuration la table pour permettre l'assemblage du lanceur et les charges utiles.
هاي
Après
رسالة
le transfert
للجميع.
en zone de lancement, nous réalisons la mise en configuration de la table pour permettre les connexions nécessaires à la chronologie finale de lancement.
Donc l'ingénieur météo au Centre spatial guyanais, il va tout d'abord réaliser des
مهندسة
prévisions pour
أرقاد
toutes les
جوية.
activités pour lesquelles la météo a un impact. Par exemple, les transferts satellites ou lanceurs. Pour les lancements, l'ingénieur météo va surveiller les conditions pour établir les critères pour le décollage. Donc ça va porter sur du risque de foudre et les conditions de vent à la fois en altitude et près de la surface.
Je suis autorité technique de l'étage principal d'Arian5. J'ai suivi son intégration au Muro. Aujourd'hui, je suis son intégration en Guyane sur le lanceur. Et pendant la chronologie finale, je m'assurerai du bon remplissage des réservoirs jusqu'au décollage. Aujourd'hui, si je travaille dans le spatial, c'est pour relever le défi d'un professeur qui me disait que c'était impossible, c'était un rêve inatteignable. J'ai relevé le défi.
And good for her. Let's see if we can go over now to Tony Tolker-Nielsen. Tony is the Director of Space Transportation Systems at the European Space Agency. Tony, thank you for joining us from the fishbowl. Space Team Europe, it was very inspiring to see those people talking. What does it mean to you?
I saw a T-shirt with the Space Team Europe for the first time during the James Webb Space Telescope launch in December 21, and I find it a great idea. Space is booming right now. There's an acceleration of the use of space, and above all, an acceleration of the commercialization of space. Unfortunately, this is going much faster outside Europe, in the US and China, and also India is catching up very fast. The space economy is foreseen to be booming in the coming decades, and in order not to lose out on this, like we did in the dot-com economy 20 years ago, we must get our act together and accelerate the use of space in Europe. All the various players, from the users to the space industry and the funding authorities, will stand much stronger with a common vision and common goals.
Tony, thank you very much indeed. I appreciate you talking to us from the inside there of the fishbowl. Tony Tolker-Nielsen, thank you very much indeed. So, Arian6, very much the new kid on the block, the product of the European space expertise here in Europe. Raphael and I were lucky enough to visit her pad. The Arian6 launch zone consists of a range of facilities and connections.
Once the rocket is integrated with its pad, it becomes one whole system.
This ensemble of buildings is the launch pad itself, and from one side to the other, it's 200 meters wide. That's about the size of 2 football fields.
And this is the mobile gantry. It is as tall as the Statue of Liberty and slightly heavier than the Eiffel Tower.
Arian6 is assembled horizontally, then transferred to the pad, where it is raised vertically thanks to the gantry. The fairing with the satellites inside is hoisted and connected to the top.
The mobile gantry protects the launcher during preparations on the pad, and it allows the teams to work on the rocket until shortly before liftoff.
There are 22 levels, with platforms giving the teams access to all the parts of the Arian6 launcher. And I am on top of the rocket. And this is the fairing. This is where inside the satellites will be sitting comfortably, waiting for launch.
And I'm in the bottom, down here in the bowels of the building. And these big pipes run all the way 300 meters from the outside to the rocket, delivering cryogenic fuel.
It is complex engineering. They must be kept at extremely cold temperature in order to maintain the oxygen and the hydrogen as liquids.
Shortly before launch, the gantry rolls back along rails, revealing Arian6.
The mechanical, electrical and fluid lines, which join the rocket to its pad, disconnect when the launcher lifts off.
This is a giant exhaust pipe, and during the launch, all the air plumes will be coming out of there.
And for Arian6, we have added the very special deflector. It's used to divide the flames in two parts, and inside here is going to be 3,000 degrees during the launch.
So you better not be on this pad during liftoff. Another important player is the water tower. As the rocket lifts off, water deluges the pad to reduce vibrations on our precious passengers inside. We are 6 meters underneath the pad with the rocket sitting right on top of it. And the water comes from the water tower through these massive pipes and then up onto the cable.
And the water is drawn from a dedicated lake. And once it's used, it's carefully treated in order to protect the wide variety of animals and plants and released back into nature.
Once it's done its job, the launch pad is reset for the next mission.
Ready to continue the outstanding story of Arian.
Very impressive to see how Arian6 is becoming reality. And you know, Katie, a couple days after our visit, the mobile gantry was actually retracted for a rehearsal representative of a real launch sequence. The good news is it went very well, and the next step will be a hot firing test of the lower stage engine Vulcan.
All under very tight security, of course, by the French Armed Forces, who are based here at the Guyana Space Centre and are celebrating their 50th year.
Every time a rocket is launched from the Guyana Space Centre, over 300 military men are mobilised. Their mission? To protect the Space Centre, its surroundings and those present. The spaceport, spread out over 660 square kilometres, hosts important missions for European space activities and national defence, all of which are extremely sensitive and high-risk operations. Before each launch, around 100 legionnaires and artillery troops are deployed on roads, tracks, and also within savanna and forest zones, on quad bikes, off-road and track vehicles, and even in kayaks. Their surveillance also extends to the maritime zone, where 2 vessels from the French Navy patrol this restricted area. A Confiance-class patrol vessel and a coastal patrol vessel from the Maritime Gendarmerie. As for its airspace, this is constantly monitored by 2 Fennec helicopters with snipers on board. A Puma helicopter is also ready to take off at any moment, carrying on board soldiers and gendarmes prepared to intervene in case of intrusion. On the ground, there are surface-to-air missiles operated by artillery troops, capable of destroying any threatening aircraft. To complement the security and protection system, the CNES, the National Centre for Space Studies, calls upon the Paris Fire Brigade and the Gendarmerie, who are permanently present on site. Protecting Europe's spaceport is the armed forces in French Guyana's main mission, but they also fight against illegal gold mining and illicit fishing. This year, the 3rd Foreign Infantry Regiment, one of the armed forces units in French Guiana, marks its 50th anniversary. 50 years of expertise and protection at the service of European space activities and international influence.
Travelling at 8 kilometres, just over 8 kilometres per second. Our distance, 6,000, nearly 7,000 kilometers from the pad and an altitude of 270 kilometers high. We're really starting to climb now into space. And there are people all over Europe working in space transportation. They're represented by an organization called the Community of Arian Cities.
Less than an hour from Paris lies the historical birthplace of European rocket, Vernon. This charming little town on the outskirts of Normandy, with just over 24,000 inhabitants, is known not only for its quality of life or its old mill, but also for 60 years of innovation and space exploration. This year, the city of Vernon, with its sights set more than ever on space, has been chosen to preside over the Community of Arian Cities, CVA. Established in 1998, the CVA aims to strengthen cooperation amongst its various space partners, inform citizens about space activities in Europe, and contribute to the training of future professionals in the space field.
À travers cette présidence, Vernon mettra évidemment l'espace et tous les acteurs de la filière du spatial et de l'aéronautique au cœur du débat, avec des objectifs très simples, comme la valorisation de la dimension spatiale de notre territoire, valoriser également le campus de l'espace, site qui est le berceau de notre histoire aéronautique vernonnaise. Valoriser aussi le savoir-faire et la haute technologie des entreprises du territoire. En somme, valoriser l'attractivité de Vernon.
European space exploration has been part of this city's DNA for half a century. It is in the Arian Group factory in Vernon that the new engines of Arian6 are currently being designed, as are all the engines in previous Arian launches.
Arian Group et la ville ont un lien indéfectible depuis des dizaines et des dizaines d'années. Le site de Vernon est d'une grande importance, une importance stratégique pour l'accès à l'espace. En 1946, 50 ingénieurs allemands spécialistes des missiles V2 arrivent à Vernon et contribuent à créer le LRBA, qui se spécialisera par la suite dans la conception, la fabrication et les essais des moteurs fusées. En 1971, l'activité moteur-fusée du LRBA est intégrée à la Société européenne de propulsion pour devenir par la suite Ariane. Véronique, Vesta, Vexin, Valois, Viking, Vulcain et Vinci sont autant de noms dont le V rappelle
A summer university for Arian cities, an event dedicated to Arian5's last flight, and even a space-themed fireworks display. Throughout the year, the city of Vernon is organizing a rich program of events inspired by the colors of the Community of Arian Cities.
I love how he listed the name of all the engines beginning with the V. And during that film, we had confirmation there that we entered the sphere of the tracking station in Malindi on the east coast of Africa. So they've now taken over monitoring events from Libreville. 24 minutes and 15 seconds into the flight. Raphael, we're getting closer now to switching off our engine.
Yes, in order to prepare the separations of our first satellite, H2SAT, so it's important to do it on time in a very precise way, as it will really drive the satellite's lifetime in space. Arian5 is famous for its injection precision. We've seen it for the launch of James Webb Space Telescope a year and a half ago, and again for JUICE spacecraft in April. Arian5 was so precise that it considerably increased the life expectancy of these space probes in space.
Extinction de l'étage supérieur cryotechnique.
So the DDO confirmed that it got successfully cut off that upper stage.
Début de la manœuvre d'orientation au profit de Heinrich Hertz satellite.
And he's announced the beginning of the orientation maneuvers for Heinrich Hertz satellite. So really getting now into the next phase of the journey, preparing to separate our two satellites from the mothership. Right now, without the engine, we are coasting in the coast phase, which we often call the ballistic phase, which means, I believe, that we are traveling without power. And we're on trajectory.
Yeah, we are really starting to climb into space. In the next 5 minutes, we will almost triple the altitude, going from well, 700 kilometers to more than 1,326 kilometers, where the Heinrich Hertz satellite will be released.
And we have a slightly different trajectory today, don't we?
Yes, like I said, we are targeting a slightly lower inclination as usual, and that's a good thing because the satellites will use less fuel in order to rejoin the geostationary orbit, which is around the equatorial plane.
And the people monitoring all of these operations are actually in a telemetry center on a hillside just behind the Mission Control Center. We call it here the CVI, which is the sort of French acronym for real-time visual control, and they're getting all the information there.
Yeah. So the team here are receiving the data from the tracking stations. So they check the status of the launcher in real time, especially regarding the propulsion, the guidance, and the trajectory. Most of the data is not analyzed in real time. It's analyzed offline by the teams in the days and weeks following the launch. That's why we also constantly improve our knowledge of the launcher. Let me remind you that the success rate of Arian5 is 98%.
Yes, a very good success rate. Going through a very specific set of maneuvers here, orientation maneuvers. Once we release our satellites, they've got a long journey ahead. They've got to get to their final orbital slot. That's 36,000 kilometers above the Earth. We call that geostationary orbit. And in order for them to be able to do that, we have to set them off on their journey properly and to their exact position and orientation in space.
Absolutely. Actually, each satellite has its own set of requirements for being released into space in very specific conditions. For example, for an Heinrich Hertz satellite, we need to release the spacecraft such that it is slightly rotating on itself at a speed of 2 degrees per second. You know, like a barbecue spit. We can see on the animation that the upper stage is...
He's telling us that the ballistic phase is going normally.
Exactly. So the upper stage is slightly spinning the satellite. So it's also performing orientation maneuvers in order to be directed at 90 degrees with respect to the sun. This is also a specific requirement, usually done in order to distribute the heat evenly over all parts of the satellite.
Arian5 has a fantastic track record.
Yeah, of course. Well, in 27 years of operation, 239 satellites into orbit, it constantly improved its performance. Can I start a little quiz with you?
Oh dear.
What was the fastest Arian5?
I don't know, but I have a feeling you're going to tell me.
That was for the Mercury mission Bepi Colombo. On October 2018, the rocket reached almost 11 kilometers per second.
Fantastic, 11 kilometers per second. That's a phenomenal speed. Coming up now on the first main event, H2 separation. That's what it looks like up there.
الساتلايت الألماني هيرتز H.
Séparation Heinrich Hertz satellite confirmée.
And we have separation of Heinrich Hertz satellite. Our first satellite has starting its new life in space. It needs to climb to 36,000 kilometers. And obviously a whole load of things have to happen in the meantime. But we still have our second passenger inside the cylinder. Can't see it right now, can we?
Yeah, very good news, of course, but the mission is definitely not over. So the teams are extremely focused because we have another passenger to deliver into space. Next step is the separation of the black structure, the dual long structure Silda, which will reveal the lower passenger, Syracuse 4B. So the satellite will meet space for the first time in a couple of minutes. It needs to be released also in a very specific way. So in this case, the upper stage will stop spinning because Syracuse 4B needs to be separated in a stabilized way. And also, the upper stage will rotate in order to separate the satellite in the direction of the sun, this time, with the thrusters directly pointed at our star.
Coming up now on the next part, the important phase of removing the cylinder so that we can reveal Syracuse 4B inside, that clever piece of kit, the attachment kit, which allows us to attach the satellite in the upper position and protect the satellite in the lower position.
It should happen in any second.
Moving very carefully and very, very slowly away.
Séparation, Silda confirmée.
We have confirmation there that the cylinder has now been removed.
Another very
and moving away in again a very carefully planned set of maneuvers.
Début de la manœuvre d'orientation au profit de Syracuse 4B.
And he's announced the beginning of the orientation maneuvers for Syracuse 4B.
So you actually see the upper stage rotating in order to separate the satellite in a very specific direction with respect to the sun. I can also mention that the two satellites are separated with a safety distance in order to make sure that they will not collide with each other, because you know they are following the same trajectory towards the geostationary orbit, and in this case it's dozens of kilometers that separate the two satellites, thanks to the orientation maneuvers that are being performed right now by the upper stage.
The teams at the Malindi tracking station keeping their watchful eye now on all these operations and sending back the data here to the CVI teams, who then provide that to the range operations manager, Rem Boyce, to announce. This is the scheduled time for separation.
Séparation Syracuse 4B confirmée.
And we have separation of Syracuse 4B. That's great news. Arian5 has delivered her second passenger, bang on target, over the Indian Ocean. Congratulations to all the Syracuse 4B teams and to the H2SAT teams. Best wishes to all the teams now on the ground in the two control rooms, taking over your new satellites and going through the early phases of the operations. Happy faces all around here.
Congratulations to all the teams, of course. We'll see a funny passenger here
in the control room
with the requisite sunglasses.
طبعا نجحت المهمة وانفصلت الأقمار الصناعية عن الصاروخ اريان، وكانت هذه آخر مهمة لاريان 5. والآن تكون وكالة الفضاء الأوربية في حالة فراغ من النواقل المستقلة، تنتظر حتى ينجح اريان 6، وقد يأخذ أكثر من سنة 2023 أو 24. فبالتالي في عندهم خيارات كثيرة في قضية النقل. احتمال هم يلجأوا لفايجا سي اللي هو الصاروخ الإيطالي، رغم في حالات فشل لكنه مش مؤكد، أو سيتعامل مع الصواريخ الأمريكية فالكون 9 أو الصواريخ الروسية سيوز. شكرا للجميع، وإحنا طولنا عليكم. الساعة الآن 1:30 صباحا، ونراكم إن شاء الله في فعالية قادمة. شكرا للجميع. شكرا لكم.